Hey, it's Bob. Thanks for joining me for another episode of Elevate Your AIQ. On today's show, I caught up with Ilyse Shuster-Frohman, co-founder of Mothership, and we delved into the evolution of work and the concept of a total workforce ecosystem. I first met Ilyse in a community of freelance economy advocates and founders, myself an advocate and Ilyse a founder. So I was excited to geek out on these topics with her. We explored the integration of AI in workplace technologies and workflows, the potential of fractional work, and the importance of comprehensive talent assessment. Our conversation touches on other important topics, such as leveraging former employees' expertise through talent communities and the challenges of adopting new workplace solutions. Lisa and I also chat about the ethical considerations surrounding AI use, particularly when it comes to talent-related decisions. If you're curious about the growing importance and impact of the freelance economy and why it's becoming an essential component of your global talent strategy, along with some AI, of course, I think you'll appreciate my conversation with Ilyse. Thanks for listening.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Elevate Your AIQ. Today, I have with me Ilyse Shuster-Frohman from Mothership. How you doing, Ilyse?
Great, Bob. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Very much looking forward to this conversation. I'm really impressed with what you've built with Mothership, and I want our listeners to hear all about it. But the bulk of this will be just your personal perspective and experiences of what you're seeing, what your clients are seeing, what your clients are asking for. I think this is a really important set of topics around workforce ecosystems, freelance marketplaces for the future of work itself. So let's dig into it. But first, I thought you could just give our audience just a quick TLDR of your background and the impetus for creating Mothership.
Thanks, Bob. Well, thanks for all the great compliments. Compliments to you as well for all the great work that you do, and you're so well versed. And so, again, thanks for having me. And back at you.
My pleasure.
Yeah, of course. So my background is, I hail from South Africa, so faraway land. So of course I've seen a few things, and then immigrated to America back in 1996. And so that was a time where, New York was ripe with flux and, pre-Giuliani days. So it was just almost like being in South Africa, but just concrete jungle, as opposed to the real jungle. But there I just cut my teeth at, FIT studying graphic design. I also have a marketing and communications degree. And I think, if you think about a lot of what I do today, it's so tied to communications, really. And communication, Bob, is actually, sounds like such a simple concept, especially when you deal with, AI. But really, I always talk about connection and data connection. And really, that's communication to me. And so that's something that I never thought that I would necessarily translate in this arena. But of course, I work for big corporates between New York and LA for all kinds of large enterprises, from entertainment to one of the largest talent agencies out there, United Talent Agency out in LA. And so, of course, always managing people, teams, always just kind of seeing the breakdown and the silos and the issues around, what was going on within the organization and what was going on within the individual. So I, transitioned from there into opening up my own advertising and creative agency after working for all these large corporates that I mentioned, a few that I mentioned, and then bringing it all under one roof and creating this interface where essentially talent could be accessed by individuals, hiring managers, etc. And there was a huge flux in the market, a convergence going on at the time between what was happening with agencies and what was happening with corporations and how they were accessing talent and accessing project teams, so to speak, right? And then also just seeing where technology was evolving and creating this direct connection and really what I call lifting the veil, taking down the Chinese wall, if you will, for lack of a better term, but really just breaking down the silos between those that did the work and those that needed the work done. And then, of course, it opened up this entire opportunity, which was to not just build very next generation technology that makes all of that happen, but goes so much further, but also creating what we call a total workforce ecosphere, Bob. It came to, as the whole venture unraveled, First we started out actually with a workspace concept, funnily enough, a micro workspace concept that we still have today. But, of course, everything had to be tech enabled, and that's where we built out our platforms. And then as we've evolved throughout rolling that out, first as a marketplace, and now as an actual SaaS product that can be white labeled within any organization, we've now built out this networked opportunity that connects this ecosphere and that also brings workers and people together with all the things that they really need. And of course, it's a giant vision. It's a massive undertaking. We've got foothold with placing people in every which way for large corporations, for a very large enterprise. And now with our technology getting deployed into these organizations as a white labeled solution, also having those organizations access our tech as an external solution, and just seeing how market ready everything is right now for, first of all, that to operationalize, and then, of course, the additional ecosphere to operationalize behind it.
Wow, that is a lot that you've put together over these last, what, 7 or so years? Is that right?
Yes, exactly. My favorite numbers.
So when you say ecosphere, is that what you consider multiple ecosystems, or is it more than just the sort of, talent pools and things like that? Like how would you define the ecosphere?
Right. Well, our tech, to start with, is a total people platform. So there, it's a 9 module suite covering credentialing, search and match. So really just disrupting the old school way of hiring, replacing the resume, and replacing the old school process of finding people first and foremost. Right. Let's create a network, search and match opportunity, and then we have a workflow module, productivity intelligence. Manage, essentially AI management and also management intelligence as well. That is all tracked and managed there. And then it goes through to payments, development, of course, upskilling, cross-skilling, reskilling, and then we get into mobility as well. And these are all within each organization. So each organization has their own workspace. Each organization has their own community of workers. Each organization is either engaging those workers every which way, if they're next gen and if they're really, with it and maximizing the resources they have before they go externally to find more. But that's not enabled properly yet, right? There's still so much waste, so much haste. And then it's, of course, not operational efficiency around running communities. So we start there. And that's where we're deploying these environments. Our external solution, our external marketplace catches everything when it leaves the 4 walls of that organization and allows for this internal, external opportunity where data breaks are not happening, where people are not just like checked at the door, sorry, you got laid off and now leave our community, leave our talent pool. I mean, just because you're not employed there doesn't mean that it's in their best interests or in yours to completely leave their community, right? There's a way to create stickiness and to create, to continue the relationship, right? Because you never know. And because there's a lot of reasons that I'm not going to bore you with today, but if you're interested, you can find out. But just to answer your question succinctly, that is where the ecosphere and the network, first and foremost, is most important. And then, of course, our workspace, the workspace of our clients, all the dormant workspace out there. We know there's plenty of it. And then at the same token, the supportive modules, the mentorship, the networking, the wellness the support, the personal support. And then bringing that to the table from a consultative standpoint is something that, we offer, but we'll offer even more so as we kind of, really have these other pieces really built out and operationalized. But that is where everybody doesn't just need to get operationalized and networked, they also need to be supported inside and outside of the 4 walls of an organization for all the reasons that I just mentioned.
Is it safe to say that you're getting a lot of clients who look at the complexity of everything you just described and they say, if only there was one platform that could do all of these things to reduce the complexity and the friction and the context switching and all of these things, right? I mean, it seems like you're taking the place of, like you said, those 9 modules could be a significant undertaking, assuming you even had the budget to take on and implement all of those things, which I imagine not every organization does. That would be a multi-year implementation to even get it out there, let alone the additional time it takes for mass adoption, I suppose.
It's a great point, Bob, because I always scratch my head when I hear about the multiple years that it's going to need, to do this. And, but at the same time, you're right. This is not a small undertaking. It's not something that we should scoff at, and not something that necessarily is simple. But, with our platform, it's really about, uploading an Excel sheet of your entire workforce, and they will be credentialed, and they will be onboarded into the system, into the platform, and they can be operationalized from there in a matter of minutes, depending on how much data you have, but really quickly. This isn't a matter of needing to do it over a long period of time. I think what takes a long period of time, to your point, is just getting all the stakeholders to understand this whole new, what we call an expert system. As much as we call it an ecosphere, it's really an expert system for them to understand, oh, this is like a whole nother way of doing things. And then talking about operationalizing spend, first of all, there's a lot of rogue spend that's happening within these organizations anyway, because the hiring managers or the heads of these departments are already hip to these better ways of doing things, these quicker, more efficient ways of doing things. So now internal stakeholders are trying to catch up and get things, into place. And I'm a little bit surprised by why it would take so long and require so much. I think it's about perhaps unraveling relationships, perhaps unraveling, maybe some people feel bad that they brought something in that was very expensive, that now might be a bit obsolete. Or, and of course it also has to do with operationalizing the data, right? So what we do there is we allow for API opportunity, where they can bring it in first, they can operationalize it with their communities, they can API into these systems. They don't have to ever abandon these systems. They can keep them around. But day one to day, I think they should at least be running it as a people platform for their community. And to wait a year or two really boggles my mind. Although, yes, it's a lot of what we see everyone needing as, not everyone, but certain organizations, especially large enterprise, needing as an expected timeline. But I think that that's perhaps perception, not reality. How do we change the perception? And what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think behavior change always takes longer than we might anticipate. And when you have diverse audiences, sometimes there are people that need to be dragged along, or they want to see results for themselves before they a certain people manager takes it on for themselves, or you still have cultural things around the inhibitors we've seen with talent marketplace adoption in general, right? Like talent hoarding. And do we also change the incentives for managers to see their employees thrive, even if that means having to leave and take on another opportunity? It could be, the integration of skills, trying to shift to, skills-based hiring and skills-based organizations. I think there's always there's always something. I mean, you spend time in large organizations as I have, and it's just seems like there's the behavior change, there's competing priorities, there's sort of tug of war for budget sometimes, right? You've got one pool of money that everyone could be fighting over, and you've got to handle the must do's before the should do's. But I do think there's a lot of things that you can't anticipate, and nothing moves as fast as as you would like. The bigger the organization gets, it seems. But I liked what you were saying about the talent. Just because you have to make an uncomfortable decision about talent based on economic circumstances or business performance, et cetera, it doesn't mean that that person should just be kicked off the island, right? This person was loyal, they were a great teammate, they had leadership qualities, they checked all these boxes, and circumstances changed, and now they need to find something else to do. Well, there's no reason why you shouldn't maintain some professional relationship with them, because you never know how the pendulum may swing the other way, or the circumstances were such that you're going to spin up a new project or build a new product, and this person would be perfect. I mean, that's part of having a dynamic workforce ecosystem, right? Is being able to understand when you've got sort of a utility player whose time.
The use case podcast is where technology vendors get to talk about themselves. And it's a wonderful place for vendors, investors, and practitioners to listen to the story of the solution, the features, the benefits, the attributes, etc. And we get to know the CEO or founder during the call, and we also get to know the tech. So subscribe to the Use Case podcast.
Has come to rejoin a team, or maybe you recommend them for something else, and again see them sort of thrive in other circumstances on another team. So I
Right.
think people
Right.
lose sight of that in talent acquisition in general, because I see the struggle with even candidate rediscovery, let alone employee sort of rediscovery and tapping into alumni networks and things like that.
Right. So the talent acquisition cost on that is massive. So we talk about spend and everybody protecting spend, and the problem is everyone hasn't never spent more than they do today, in my opinion, on a lot of unnecessary things that are, overcomplicated as to why they can't, be dismantled for something simpler, right? But and I talk about this a lot, the redundancy, the inefficiency of spend, and now we got rogue spend, and now there's just spend, right, all over the
Yep.
place. But the point is, there's a knowledge effect to that, right? So I love your Hopping Galaxies t-shirt, as I told you on the beginning of our call. But it's a great analogy for what we're talking about right now, right? That the talent is hopping around, right? And so, what a bad strategic decision to, and I was just actually before this interviewing John Healy actually on my podcast. So sorry everybody if I'm wearing the same outfit, but but at the same time, what we were going to bring up there, we talked about a lot of things, but we talk about what the individual owns as their data. We have a credentialing module. It goes with the worker. It's actually a data wallet that the worker can keep. It replaces their resume, and it's a whole three-dimensional persona of the person. So that's their data, right? That's what they own, they came with. They also come with a certain amount of knowledge to an organization. And then together with the organization, they gain more knowledge. And the organization oftentimes invests in that individual, and they both contribute, right? I mean, of course, it's a fair trade. They're getting essentially paid for their knowledge, right? But the knowledge is not completely transferred to the organization. When that person leaves, guess what? The knowledge that you invested in them to achieve and that you essentially gave them walks out the door. The point is, what a bad investment, right? Like, why would you want that knowledge under any circumstances, unless it is, of course, somebody was fired or there was a real issue or there was, something that was obviously you couldn't come back from. Why would you want to completely disconnect from not just that individual for the talent acquisition cost, that you might have to go find them again, or for all the other expertise that can bring your organization, even on a consulting basis, on an IC level? I mean, there's so many other ways to leverage this amazing individual to, stay close to them. And then at the same time, to also leverage the amazing knowledge that you have passed on, and not just let it walk out the door, to actually be able to still have it be something that you could leverage ongoing. And I think that's very valuable, if you agree.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I guess it brings up an interesting point around how that knowledge is captured and potentially disseminated. But even today, as people think about how to implement, generative AI within their organization, there has been I guess it'll probably be an ongoing debate about knowledge work in general, right? And if you do have people, let's say for argument's sake, that you do have a lot of people who don't just have a lot of knowledge, but they document that knowledge. Now that's training data for the AI, right? And so I think there's this flip side of this knowledge equation about having that tacit knowledge, the institutional knowledge, and that knowledge transfer, the knowledge sharing with the rest of the organization. And now you can basically, codify that. And what are the implications of that for the future of knowledge work, and how does that adjust the needs that I have when I do go look for talent, right? So I know I kind of completely switched gears on you there, but I do think it's important to think about as you go out and you try to figure out, well, I've got this set of tasks that today we call it a role. We're going to write up a job description for that role, but based on the tasks, if I break it down into tasks and then I look out across that ecosphere of what is the optimal way to actually execute those tasks based on the context and the workflows that those tasks are a part of and things like that, then I get more granular and hopefully smarter about how I actually execute some of that work. And it may be through, a full-time employee, it may be through a contractor or a freelancer, or maybe there's an AI agent that can handle some of those things.
Right. And so knowledge, intelligence, right? It's the same thing. And then I always come back to, well, it's also data, right? And so, I mean, we have workflow tools on our platform. So you can, so the credentials, matches, workflows, pays, develops and mobilizes, right? So you're catching all of that intelligence within the platform as it's internal to your organization. With Mothership, we have it external with our people. And of course, there's a lot of compliance and risk around all of it for all of us as well. But the point is that it brings up a great point, one that I think about a lot, as to who really owns intelligence. And I think it's going to become something that's going to be a much bigger thing, of course, as, our platforms are machine learning and large language model backed, but they also have a built-in ethical construct, which we take very seriously, right? And, we have to do it that way. But at the same time, we have to also define and start to define the ownership of IP more than we ever have before. And the IP is not just tied anymore to a document, it's tied to the person, right? This is where the intelligence is literally in someone's head, not necessarily just in a file anymore. So we track the files, we track all of that. We track all of that, of course, so that there is some, the guardrails. There are guardrails around that kind of IP. But this intelligence IP, the network creates guardrails and some sort of trackability, and we'll get more intelligent with that as time goes on. But the question of ownership, Bob, I find that to be really interesting just as it pertains to AI in general. I mean, our clients can, of course, build their own LLMs and their own intelligence. But again, it sits with the people and people move. And who's to say what's not the people's and what is the organization's? The delineation of that, I think, is very interesting.
I think it's going to get a lot more complicated, don't you think? I mean, I'm glad you brought up the responsible AI pieces because, of course, I was going to bring that up at some point. But but in this case, I think it's really fascinating and difficult to ascertain like where you draw the line based on these like micro contributions potentially to different projects that are under different entities, right? If I'm freelancing or doing fractional work and I'm splitting my time across 5 organizations and I'm just trucking along and I've got these workflows and I'm just popping ideas and thoughts and knowledge into these different things. I mean, you actually need, I guess, similar to traceability and the observability of data as it goes through these algorithms and these AI tools. Similarly, you could have the need for the traceability, similar level of traceability for intellectual property as it flows through. I mean, seems like that could get ugly.
Right, exactly. And that's where I think law firms are quite worried about how this is all going to play out. And of course, they're having a lot of debriefings and, there's a lot of roundtables going on, Bob.
Yeah,
Everyone's having a roundtable now to figure a lot of things out, right? I mean, this is like epic stuff. This is just really evolutionary in my mind, right? And so this is, I would say, giant leap for mankind, right? It's a really
right.
giant leap, right? Of course, we've got all the space lingo, the final frontier,
Yeah.
we go there, but that's really the gravity of it. But at the same time, hopefully not that serious, and I don't think so doomsday, right? I always believe there's good that comes out of the bad. So even if it looks like it's bad, I really ultimately think it'll be good. I think that the fact that everyone can access such knowledge and such intelligence, I think is going to serve us more than it's going to hurt us. And I think that's the ultimate thing to keep in mind, right? That we will figure it out, the parameters, the guardrails. Maybe we've been holding on to things too tightly to not to our benefit, right? And so I think that's going to be interesting.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really, really good point. I think we've been maybe over legislating or over litigating on some of these things, and people have been sort of nitpicky. It's just the nature of this society that we live in, at least in the United States. But
Right.
I do think that the recent developments around like these AI agents and this what people call this agentic workflow is really an interesting concept, and I do see tremendous potential for that, especially as we move away from this sort of fascination with individual productivity and we really start talking about, where much greater value can be obtained, by stringing these these tasks together with some level of intelligence, as well as just to support decision making and not just, sort of task execution. And I wonder how you think about that in the context of Mothership, and how, talent is sort of pulled in and out of different projects and stuff.
We've always led with being a total talent organization for that reason, right? I mean, some people go very niche into just 1099 ICs. Some people go very deep into W2ers, contingent or full time. And then, of course, there's the whole SOW thing. So we do it all, right? Because we have a construct to do that, and we have tech to do that, and we have operational efficiency to do that. But we do it with purpose, because oftentimes, Bob, it's the same person. And as the years are going to go on, even more so, it's the same person. And then, of course, for that turnkey total talent solution for the client, for the talent, right? It's like, those siloed systems, those niche solutions that now everybody has to reapply to be involved in that marketplace that just handles this kind of hire, right? And that's also where the networked effect comes in, is that those guys can all come to the table. They can all be part of the ecosphere. But, it still needs to be, I think, part of a central system, a central solution, an expert system that's at least centrally accessed, right? And centrally, standardized, right? Which I think really helps everybody to not have to relearn tech every single time they're trying to engage somebody, right? And then at the same time, not have to redesign their resume or redesign their persona for every single marketplace, right? And for every single job, application. Also, as I always say, they don't even have to apply to jobs. They can just be discoverable on the network. So I think that, the total talent opportunity for us is something that we care about, because it's about everybody being able to get a job every which way, globally, at any time. And then, of course, the whole supply thing is what that was born from, right? It was also about, hey, guys, like, there's just not enough there's not enough people and skills out there to do just niche point solution things. Like, we really need to, be sustainable and recycle, for lack of a better term, what we have, and really just diversify skill sets, get more, before we think about, machines and robots and all the things that, I think we need anyway, because humans only want to go so far and should only be expected to go so far. I think humans have been expected to be machines for too long. And that's a whole separate topic. I'm going to cover that as well. But, outside of just the fact that that we need this, machine, if you will, modus operandi for certain tasks, for certain things that humans are just broken over, right? At the same time, we're really not utilizing all the amazing things that humans are able to do. And that means that a person can be an IC and a full-time worker and perhaps a contingent worker all in the same week, sometimes even in the same day, Bob. And what that means for them is not only that that they're able to not be bored and do different things and, utilize, the whole brain, right? Not just a part of it, right? And utilize all their skills, but the market is able to access all of this richness of supply and operational efficiency all round. I love that. And I think that that's obviously something that we've seen as a problem, and it's not necessarily tied to birth rates.
Right, right. I
Whether you're a payroll pro or an employee wanting to understand your paycheck better, we've got you covered. Tune into It's About Payroll for expert insights on payroll trends and compliance, or check out It's About Your Paycheck, the go-to podcast for employees looking to understand their pay and rights. 2 great shows, 2 great hosts. Listen now, brought to you by Work Defined, where payroll meets clarity.
totally appreciate and respect that perspective. I think similarly in terms of how, well, it goes back to human potential, right? And your human potential is not you're the perfect fit for this job, that somebody made up the title and somebody decided that this is the best way to describe the work that's going to be done, not necessarily thinking that, in a month this job is going to change or morph, and that we've got other things that need to get done, and then we're going to have to open another rec. It just seems so logical to me to sort of decompose some of what we consider, roles today, and then find a way to, like you said, maybe in the morning in a working with one client on a design thinking workshop. In the afternoon, I'm running a lunch and learn on AI, readiness and upskilling, and then in the afternoon, I'm doing, product strategy. So that's the best way to utilize. And I mean, you want me to bring my whole self to work? I'll do that, but I'll do it in pieces, and that work will be for multiple, employers, basically.
And it's an earnings and spend choice, Bob. You know how it is, right? Some people, you and I have worked in corporate where it's like no raises this year, or no more heads are open. So you're just like limited. We'd call it the glass ceiling, but really it wasn't just for women, right? This was like about everyone has a limit, right? Like the organizations have a limit to how much they want to spend on a certain hire. And so, the people that work for them are limited by how much they can earn, right? So there's a lot of animosity around that. There can be a lot of issues around that. A lot of things get stolen because of that. People
Yeah.
are just really just trying to earn more within a construct, trying to get water out of a stone, so to speak, Bob, right? So this just opens that up where it's like, it stretches everybody to the point where they become unlimited earners. They don't have to just rely on this one source of income. And the corporation doesn't have to have the pressure of being that one source of income that is constantly feeling like they need to be stretched beyond what they're able to give. And so I think as long as it's comfortable for everybody, this just gives that extra room for that unlimited possibility and taking away those limits that have, I think, been a source of frustration for both sides.
No, I love it. I had a question for you about the way that you sort of assess and vet talent on behalf of some of your clients. And part of it is acknowledging that what you've built basically takes the place of not just multiple sort of technology solutions and tools, but also potentially multiple entities, meaning you don't necessarily need an employer of record to bring in international talent. You don't necessarily need a vendor management system to bring in whatever type of VMS you're using to pull in folks through staffing agencies, and you don't necessarily need to also have an internal marketplace and a freelance marketplace that maybe you use to supplement for your workforce with short-term projects or whatever. So you've basically amassed one solution that bridges all that. But when it comes to the talent itself and the fact that they don't need to submit resumes anymore because your profile is there and you've done some pre-vetting, I'm just curious about the assessment of both what we used to call hard and soft skills. So that could be technical skills, cognitive skills, behavioral assessments. So I'm just curious about how that might work, because today not only do you have that fragmented, sort of ecosystem or ecosphere, but you have inconsistencies in the way that talent is vetted.
You're 100% right. And so some people think, oh, this is super important, and then other people think, no, this is really important. And the truth is, it's all important because it all makes up the person. So we designed it very, very carefully. And it took us, time to really, and we learned a lot, Bob, also just from doing, the business that we do today, and that we've been doing along the way, right? Just kind of seeing like what's really important in the process, So we had a front seat at the table, if you will, to really say, okay, this is really what makes a difference here. This is really what, and there's such a life sciences side to all of this, right? At the end of the day, and I say there's a data science to this, right? This is really what we need to, the lens that we've designed this from and that we've looked at this from. So, we take in hard skills, soft skills, culture fit. We go very, very deep and wide, and we have multiple sections to our credentialing module. People can go as far with it as they want. We obviously, encourage people to complete the whole thing, and then once you complete it once, it just will update in real time and attach to any system and attach to any process, so that you don't have to keep updating it. But the point is, you want to give employers a full picture of yourself. You want to, because it's going to help you to find that right match. So this is where it gets compared a little bit to dating. And, I think we should have like a Mothership dating app one day when we have some bandwidth. Maybe we can solve that too, Bob, but we got our hands full here. But the point is, that stuff's not sophisticated yet either. I mean, this credentialing module can actually tie into those systems too. Why not? Right? It can attach to, Bumble and whatever else, because again, it goes with the person. It goes with the person. And so what a great thing. I mean, we love it from even a personal security standpoint. This isn't just about work for us, right? This is about really getting to know someone. So hard skills, soft skills, of course, all the verification of all of that is major, right? People might see themselves one way. And then, of course, you also want to make sure that the market can quantify that and also agree with it from a work standpoint. Institutional information, super important, education, etc. But the sections are a little bit, too many to mention. But, of course, DE&I is part of it. But what we've really done is designed a process that essentially takes in all the data points of a person, hard skills, soft skills. And by soft skills, I mean also the life sciences side of the individual.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. I do think that, the more information you can provide in an honest way, you're that much more likely to have a sort of win-win, successful and long-term relationship. So to me, the these like lazy apply, AI tools is like the antithesis of that. Like these people are applying to jobs they didn't even know. They could be getting calls back from the employers. They didn't even realize that they applied to these jobs.
And they're annoyed. They don't even want to be contacted. Yeah.
It's so stupid. We're just feeding this monster, this dysfunctional, process that has existed forever, and we're not using technology. This is where I get hung up on: are we using technology to solve real problems? And those kinds of solutions just don't. They just perpetuate a lot of the nonsense and dysfunction that we see in talent acquisition. So I'll digress on that point, but I do think everybody wants a healthy relationship, and if the best thing for both parties or all parties is for you to just work fractionally on a project, or to be in the office versus remote. I mean, there's all kinds of things that you can hash out so that you're contributing your best to potentially multiple projects for multiple clients, as long as you're in it for the right reasons, and as long as you're contributing value to the project and to the team. So yeah, so I totally respect and appreciate that perspective. Just more generally, with some of the latest technology, I mean, obviously generative AI is sort of at the center of that. I was just curious how you use it, not necessarily embedded into the Mothership platform, but just you personally. I mean, how you use it as a founder running a startup, and maybe even in your personal life, how you're upskilling yourself and using it to be more productive, or to make better decisions.
Thanks, Bob. It's a great question. I use AI when I need to, but honestly, I've been a little frustrated at times when I have used it. That's why I can't wait for, I mean, our advanced AI is called Supernova, and it's something that will be really fully born with our expert system. And as we get, global adoption, like we really need, that level of intelligence to get there. And we've already, got all these inroads for that product. But that's the product that I really look so forward to tapping into, because truthfully, the AI, and this is where general AI to me is great as assistive. It's great for, just kind of maybe like, spitting out an email or spitting out a letter that, maybe you just feel like, oh my God, I just can't write this up today. Let me just prompt the system and get something that at least is a framework. But honestly, Bob, I don't use that as much as I would like to, because the times that I have really utilized it, I found it to be not intelligent enough, honestly. I think it gives a good framework for, here's something written, or I get emails all the time, and I could tell when it's written by AI. And it kind of like, instead of, it dummies it down. I mean, there's certain things that make it great, right? Where it's like, oh, it'll cite all these things about you that, the person couldn't possibly know, and if they're going to write this at scale to this many people, right? So that it'll cite my background and what I've been doing and what have you. And so it really does give this personalized touch to the communication. But the point is that humans are intelligent enough to know it wasn't coming from you, right? This isn't like you really did the impressive part of that would usually be that this person did their homework. They did the homework, right, to tell me. And so now that gets lost a little bit, but still having those data points and that detail there is a huge time saver. So I would always, love to utilize it more in that way. I'm just really hell bent on being an original. And so that's where I observe it, I work with it. Of course, we're very entrenched with, AI here at Mothership, but at the advanced kind is really what I really see the most value in outside of general. Although I think again the assistive part is shouldn't be snuffed at by any means.
I would say I have not had consistently great results from a lot of the tools that I've played with. So I understand where you're coming from. I'm also not like a sales and marketing person, so it's not like I have a lot of outreach and drip campaigns coming out of my CRM, at least not yet. But one of my hesitations is like it just seems like it's going to sound so impersonal on top of potentially robotic in a way, right? So I can do what we used to call a mail merge and say, dear Ilyse and whatever, and I could say, oh, how are things in Miami? And, yeah, you can just insert, keyword here, right? But it's not the same. And, the recipient will often, as you have, see right through it. And it's just, I don't know. I guess everything is about balance, right? How do you balance efficiency? There's only so many hours in the day with technology, and yet somehow still make it feel, personalized and customized. And so I think it really just goes back to what your use case is. I mean, I do, if I use some of the terminology literally, I mean, Copilot, everybody could use a Copilot, right? In theory, if it alerted you to things that you forgot about or gives you a perspective that you hadn't considered, like a thought partner or, brainstorming partner and things like that. But in terms of just writing things or summarizing things, I think we have a long way to go with some of those things. In fact, if I put the transcript of this recording into a couple different AI tools, the output's going to be very similar. So there's not even, uniqueness within a particular platform, meaning a particular LLM. Like a lot of the LLMs, based on how they're trained, they're going to put things into similar contexts and frame things a similar way and whatever. It is already starting to be a lot of sameness, I guess.
Right. It's not individualized. And that's where I'm such a proponent of human intelligence being so spectacular, right? And that's where I always talk about supernova being really about artificial super intelligence, right? Where this is like human intelligence and you put that together with a machine, okay, like now you've really got something. But like just as a machine, because humans are downloading new intelligence every second. We've got an unlimited source for our intelligence. There is a limit to the machines, and they can essentially absorb some of what we pass on, right? But they don't have that higher power connection or that source connection, if you will, right? So that's already just a huge limitation. No matter how much you feed them, that's just a limitation that in microseconds we're downloading new, we're downloading new, we're downloading new, right? And then I think once we start to merge human capabilities with robotics and with machines, that's where I call it superhuman, and I think it's something that really is going to be possible, and that's, I think, leaps and bounds more powerful than even just anything artificial, right? Or just purely artificial.
Yeah, I did a lot of work around collective intelligence and collaborative decision making in my IBM days. And this was a little bit before even IBM Watson and the, predictive AI and, the sort of AI that was at the end of an analytics, trajectory as opposed to an automation trajectory. And I still contend combining human intelligence, whether that's an individual, intuition and creativity plus AI, or it's collective intelligence plus AI. AI has a role to play, but we can't lose our minds and we can't lose our critical thinking when it comes to the output of AI, as you and I have both been critical of. But where does it fill the gap? If it's going to sit in on a meeting, what role is it playing, right? Is it playing someone who's missing from the meeting? Is it playing the role of the end user of whatever this, maybe product team is concerned about. I mean, you've got to use it in the right way. And I think some of this ties to the transformation that is about to happen, if it hasn't started already, at a lot of organizations, right? If you're going to get mass adoption, then people need to be literate about what AI can do, how to use it responsibly and ethically and fairly. And you've got to think about the skills that you gain in terms of, prompting it and, eliciting the appropriate responses and just knowing how to get the right answers by asking the right questions, essentially. And you've got to have the right, mindset about it, because just like anything, we saw this with the early days of chatbots, right? They didn't know anything. You fed them a bunch of information, and it was very, structured and rigid and rules based, and there wasn't much to it. And so if you tried to deploy that in your HR service center or customer service center or whatever, you probably got a lot of pushback because it didn't answer 98% of the questions that people had. So I just think we need to be really deliberate and careful, but also start now, because this is not a transformation going back to, the multi-year, projects. This is one of those things that's going to take a long time, no matter what tools you're using, what LLMs you're using, what maybe you're building your own small language model and doing other types of experimentation. But this is why I encourage everyone to just get started, because there's a lot to unpack and understand, and things are moving quickly.
Right. And so I liken it to textbook learning versus practical on the job intelligence, right? We all know, like, we came out of college with a certain amount of knowledge, and of course you learn that from, that theoretical training, right? And then now with, platforms and systems like ours and others that are getting more of that practical intelligence, that's more that advanced arena where you're now getting, okay, now this is not just like an intern level or a junior level hire, right? This is now getting into those mid-senior levels, but it comes with experience.
For sure. So I know we kind of covered a lot of this already, but just thinking about this concept that I call AIQ,
Great.
what advice would you have for our listeners, just in terms of what to look out for and where to focus?
Right. Of course, I would say get a SaaS platform from Mothership. Manage your community appropriately, first and foremost, right? Like, give your people a home, a real home base, take care of them, and really, work on this whole intelligence thing together, is what I would say. I think that this is not about corporations usurping their workers' knowledge, right? This is, to me, a team effort. And that's where I think that whether you're doing it on tech or whether you're doing it off tech, do it, collaborate. Don't think that you're just, tricking your workforce by, usurping their knowledge. You're really leaving, as I always say, the most intelligent people in the arena off the table when you do that. And I just think the more that we collaborate and we work together and, we decide how to do this ethically together, I think having those conversations is important. Getting systems in place that are important, even just to throw things around and really start to experiment with guardrails in place is huge. Don't wait a year or 2 years to do that, because in a year or two, others that are adopting now are going to be much further ahead and you're going to be way behind. And it's just, procrastination is not king or queen, right? Procrastination is just what it is. So I think there's obviously times we all procrastinate, but this is not the time to do that, not with this. And, not just because you want to get left behind, but just because we have sustainability issues. We really have mental health issues. And it's all too much for the current workforce and the current construct. So don't wait for things to break, get ahead of it, get involved, and see down the line, fix them now.
Excellent. Excellent. Well,
Thanks,
Ilyse,
Bob.
this has been great. Enjoyed talking to you. This is always a very informative conversation, and greatly appreciate your perspective. So thank you for spending some time with me.
Thank you, Bob, for everything and your perspective and for having me as well.
Absolutely.
See you soon.
All right. Thank you again. Thanks, everyone, for listening.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.